Hello everyone, this is Wire22 and this is the second interview on this channel. This time it's an interview with a developer from doborog. There's a lot of interesting stuff here, so let's get started right now.
Hello, this is an interview for V22 on Discord, who asked if they could interview me. I'm Jonathan, and I work for doborog. So the first question, how long have you been on the team, and what position do you hold? I was hired, it's a little fuzzy, probably around late 2016, early 2017, depending on when, paperwork was signed, or that kind of thing. About 8 years, give or take. Coming up on 9 sometime next year. But and as far as what position do I hold, quality assurance specialist. So I test the gameplay as it's being developed. Kind of the closest to like a regular player. You know what I mean? Like one of the cool things about my job is that I try to advocate for the players like in my mind. You know what I mean? Like if I come across something that just got added early in development and it's just plain not fun, I will make it known. It's like, hey, Eric, hey, Ayla, hey, anyone who worked on this is not fun. And it's just things like that, putting myself in the perspective of a player. And early on, um, in Dobrog's history, there weren't many people at the company. So honestly, I was doing more than one thing before. I was doing kind of like, you know, kind of public relations, but also a lot of customer support. I had access to the bugs at doborog email for a long time as probably the primary person to answer those queries. But fortunately, like today, like it's a little different. I can concentrate on playtesting, so that's really cool. That's the most fun I have is playtesting. So let's get to some of the other questions. The second question: how do you like the team? Today it's an amazing team, but when we started, there were only 3 of us. Realistically, 2 or 3 of us. And it was like that for a long time, but towards the end of Clone Drone and the Danger Zone's development, and towards the beginning of Clone Drone and the Hyperdome's development, we were able to reasonably, feasibly take on more and more people. Some part-time, some full-time. Engineers, audio engineers, artists, stuff like that. And I really, really appreciate everyone on the team. Like we work really fast when we have to. Like an example, we released Clone Drone Hyperdome, and in less than a week, in about 6 days, we had the first update. And that was a lot of teamwork, a lot of people working really hard and really fast on adding stuff like proper left-handed support and just shoring up some of the issues that people found in the first week. How was the CDHD release? I think it was really good. It was honestly, it was quite stressful. The 3 months prior to its launch, the long days, lots of full weeks of long work days. But we had a goal, right? Like we had a vision, and we wanted to do it, and had a belief in the game, because for this last year or so, it's just been really fun. Like I couldn't wait to share Clone Drone and the Hyperdome with the players, because like VR is different. I wasn't sure if I liked it at first, to be honest. Like I was struggling to appreciate it for a couple years, and sometime around June or July, like that all changed. Like June or July, by that point, I was streaming on Twitch at the time, like development versions and stuff, and I was starting to really, really appreciate and enjoy VR as a medium, as a platform. So it's interesting, like for my first, I'm not the oldest person, but I'm not exactly the youngest person, in my 30s, early 30s, and for the first 30 years of my life, games were appreciated on a flat screen with a mouse and a keyboard. In January of 2022, I get sent a headset, and it's like, hey, we're working on a VR game. That's different. you know, but I don't know, like it was cool because I was really struggling with understanding what made it. Like I remember the first time I was in the arena, right? Like for 6 years or 5 years, I had looked at like the arena in Clone Drone in the Danger Zone, and that first time I put on a headset and I saw the arena in 3D in VR, like that was mind blowing. But you know that kind of wore off relatively quickly, and then yeah, I don't know. I didn't see the vision of it for a long time, for a couple years, but then I did, and yeah, like I mentioned, with the first like 3 months prior to launching Clone in the Hyperdome, there was a lot of work to do, but we all couldn't wait to see it, you know, in the hands of players. And that first week, it was amazing. Like the reception was unbelievable. Like it was better than I could have ever hoped. Like on the meta store page, I think we've had and maintain a 4.7 out of 5 star rating with people. Like not everyone who leaves a rating has to write a review, but those who do, primarily, they really like it. And Steam as well. I think it's 95% positive on Steam. Little less nuance on Steam. It's a, you know, thumbs down or thumbs up, but be that as it may. You know, and the people that have a negative opinion of it, like I don't take that personally. I see them as not enjoying the game, and I want to help make the game better, right? It might not be their cup of tea eventually, but we've had like experience with Clone Drone in the Danger Zone where there's people that had left a negative review, you know, a thumbs down, and we will address, oftentimes directly address their concerns, and they'll flip their review, you know, and that's a win, you know, that's a good day. That's someone who now enjoys something that we enjoy. So that's really cool. That's really rewarding as far as game development goes. What are you planning to do in the near future? For the foreseeable future, at least this next year or so, I'm fairly sure we're planning on adding features to Clone Drone in the Hyperdome, supporting it. You know, there have been things discussed in like dev chat and like, you know, Slack and stuff for additions and stuff to make come early January, and just like keep on keeping on. You know, I imagine it'll be very similar, very organic process, similar to Clone Drone in the Danger Zone, where things will just evolve over time. Additional content, more reasons to get back to it. Like you could have beat Clone Drone in the Hyperdome on your headset that first week, and then come back to it in 3 months, and I envision it being different in 3 months. You know what I mean? Like in 3 and 6 and 9 months, having more content, maybe more story, but definitely more things to do. So something new every time, kind of a thing. And then in like the long-term future, I have no idea. We haven't really discussed like 2, 3, 4 year plans or anything like that, but like short-term, support Clone Drone in the Hyperdome, possibly eventually get back to supporting Clone Drone in the Danger Zone a little bit. I mean, I know we'd really like to, but it depends. What do you think about doborog? The company, well, it's funny because at first doborog was Eric, and then doborog became a company of engineers and people, you know, like me. So doborog today is more than one person. Doborog in the beginning, I'll answer that question first. What do I think about doborog in the beginning? I think Eric is an incredible visionary when it comes to designing video games. He took a concept like I'd only ever seen in games like Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy, Jedi Knight 2, you know, where you can dismember things in various ways, you know, where your attacks deal a direct damage. It damages things in a way you can appreciate immediately. And voxel dismemberment, like that was like I don't think people think enough about how, like, revolutionary that was. Because you had games like Minecraft that were voxel-esque, but you couldn't really like damage things. You couldn't, cut an arm off of a mob or something like that. At least not without mods. So what do I think about Doborog the person? To answer that question first, it's like I really appreciate, like, I see now what he saw in VR. Like, of course I immediately saw what he saw in voxel dismemberment. With, when I first got into Clone Drone in the Danger Zone, it was just 10 levels, and I played that for probably 20, 30 hours because it was just so cool. It was like ticking all those boxes of engagement for me, and it was only 10 levels, right? So there wasn't that much to it, but like, he has a way. He has a way with coming up with stuff that's gonna, be popular, and that's not easy. It's a curiosity that I wish I could emulate more. Like, it's interesting. I'm sure people could do an entire deep dive on that kind of a thing. But let's see, like, what do I think about Doborog as the company, as a company who largely all made Conjure in the Hyperdome? I honestly think we're an indie success story, and that's. I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything. I think I think that's rare, like relatively. Like, I see a lot of indie games on Steam that have been out for a few years, maybe since 2017, 2018, and they'll only have like 300 or 400 reviews, and they'll be overwhelmingly positive reviews, but they just won't have that traction. So, I don't know, like, that kind of gets into one of the following questions, so I'll leave it there. But, I think the team is incredibly capable, like I mentioned, works incredibly quickly, and gels really well. Like, we all get along. There's, like, not a bad day at work. Like, I don't dread getting a DM from anyone on the team, kind of a thing. I've heard horror stories about people who, especially people who work QA, like, just not getting along with certain people, and it just doesn't happen at Dobro. So I feel very fortunate and very grateful. What else are you working on besides Clone Drone in the Hyperdome? Nothing that I'm aware of, honestly. I think we're, at least for the next year, and possibly further, probably further, going to concentrate on adding value for the players to Clone Drone in the Hyperdome. Yeah, like, an endless mode would be nice. A practice mode, there's some stuff in the dev build that we could port over relatively seamlessly, but probably to give some thought to it, to, and maybe cosmetics. Like, that seems to be something people are requesting in reviews. Like, they'll leave a positive review, but they'll be like, hey, I want to change the color of Blink, and that's understandable. Not everyone likes green. I like blue better myself, but yeah, as far as like unannounced secret, super secret stuff, like, I wish I had something that I could tease, but they're just heads down on working on Clone Drone and the Hyperdome. How do you rate your work? It's a dream job. Like, I've talked to a lot of friends of the family and friends of mine whose like little nieces and nephews and cousins want to get into, game testing, and they ask me like, well, how did you get into it? And the honest answer there is that I was very lucky. Um, I at the time it was on itch.io, and like, not many people, like, some people knew about it, but it wasn't nearly as popular as it ended up being. And I was using weird software at the time, and I ran into a crash, and like, I emailed, I think it was support@doborog.com or bugs@doborog.com, and I had done that a few times. I'd been playing games basically since I was 3 years old, and I'd never gotten a response. I wasn't expecting one. I get one from Eric, and he's like, oh, that's weird. Can you try this? I'm like, yeah, I tried this. It still does this. He's like, okay. The guy sends me like a build of the game that no one else has and goes, okay, I think I fixed it in this. And I'm like, yeah, you did. But if you do X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C, it does this, 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 and this, and this. And then it just started a correspondence where at one point he's like, hey, have you ever worked QA? And I'm like, no. Well, I'm kind of looking for a QA guy. So it's like when people ask me, what do I think of my job or how did I get into it? It's like I fell out, like it landed in front of me from the sky, like out of nowhere. But I would say, honestly, my best advice is just be a part of the community. Submit bug reports. Learn about what it is to do QA. Stuff like that. Like I'm glad I will say this. I'm glad I found enjoyment in playtesting VR because it was for over 2 years. It was a huge challenge. I was mentally not doing very well. Um, you know, I was working on it in therapy, stuff like that, like discussing it and like coming up with how do I do it even if I don't want to do it? And the answer to that was it's my job and I do it anyway. And I just so happened to keep doing it anyway until I didn't feel like it was work anymore. Like it was back to the fun I was having, play testing, Gundren. OBS keeps crashing, so this is not fun, but I'll power through as I can. Attempt 3 of answering the question, how would you rate your work? Most of the time it's a lot of fun. Sometimes it's a lot of work. Sometimes I'm having to repetitively test like a certain thing and it's not very fun, but like I compare it to, like my dad's an auto mechanic, right? Like he's in his 60s and has worked really hard, like physically exhausting work for all of his adult life. And I appreciate not having to do that, not to have to beat my body up to make a living. Like it's a good job. I appreciate it. I have a lot of balance too. Like work-life balance is really huge with especially Eric, but everyone on the team. Where we try to balance responsibilities with our regular life, family life, and work, and not overwork, and because that's very common for the games industry in general, is to crunch. Like you've probably heard that term. People are working 10, 12-hour days, for months to get a game out the door, and we try to not do that. Like explicitly try to not do that. So I appreciate that. I appreciate, Eric as the, kind of figurehead of the company, specifically does not like to throw off people's work-life balance and specifically tries to balance his family life and his work life with, other engagements and stuff. And so he leads by example and it works really well. What is your favorite game? That's changed along the, as time has gone on, that has definitely changed. Recently, in the last year, probably Satisfactory. As soon as Satisfactory, it's like an automation-based building game. As soon as that came out of early access into 1.0, it was back on my radar. I had probably 600 hours in it in early access in that, amount of time. And then by the end of my single player playthrough for 1.0, I nearly had 1,000 hours in that game. It's really cool. Like, but I honestly don't play games as much as I used to. Like, I have other things that I do in my life today, but every so often, like I remember, probably September, October, I was just on a kick. I was on a tear as far as Satisfactory goes. And I really like what they did with it. I wasn't sure where they were going with the story, but they they seem to wrap it up with a neat little bow. Like historically, what is my favorite game? Uh, I don't know. Like I was one of those people who bought Half-Life 2 Collector's Edition like for Christmas in 2004. Um, and so I was always into Valve games. I remember my uncle had Half-Life on a gaming computer when I was growing up, and I would always try to get a little further in the story every time. Usually started from the beginning, so I didn't get very far. I really like racing games. You know, uh, I think my favorite racing game on Windows, at least, is Need for Speed 5, Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed. Um, it's hard to play it on modern Windows computers, but for a little while I was replaying it every 2 years, like when I was on Windows 7 and Vista. I think it still worked on Vista, it still worked on 7. Then I got on Windows 10 and it was harder to. It's a Windows 95, 98 game, so it's really hard to run. But I'm sure I could figure it out. It's just, I've played it so many times that I probably don't need to play it again. And then, like, that's the thing is, like, there aren't that many interesting or engaging racing games. I think the last one, especially considering VR, the last one I played and really, really enjoyed was, like, Dirt Rally 2.0, specifically in VR. With my Quest 2 headset on, because that changes things. You're in the car, and if you're going around a really tight corner, you can actually look to the apex of the corner using your headset. It's really cool. So I try to fire up a racing game in VR every once in a while. I haven't done it in a while, but it's really fun. Like that is an applicable situation to VR that really does add to the experience, I think. Are there any interesting stories related to the development? Um, in a roundabout way, kinda like I wasn't doing so well for the first year of Clone Drone and the Hyperdome's development. We didn't have a name yet. It was just Clone Drone VR. And I got to a real low. I got hospitalized for about 11 days. And, it wasn't a fun time. Work was strained. Like, relations with people at work was strained, and relations with my family was strained. And, I was going through a lot. Depression, stuff like that. And so I decided that I wanted help. I decided that I would follow suggestions and, you know, ask for direction and get as much help as I could. And I continue to do that to this day. I have group support at least 4 times a week, and this is years later. This is almost 2 years later. So it's not particularly, well, it's a little salacious, but it's not particularly, like, super interesting. It's just, like, I have matured, I would say, as far as, like, how I consider, I just, I try not to let things bother me as much anymore. Like I was taking ownership of way too much that wasn't mine to take ownership of. And I think we can all easily fall in that trap, so just personal development, personal, like I think my trajectory kind of followed the trajectory of Clone Drone and the Hyperdome. We were kind of a thing a year in, and then like that next 2 years, I think the game got a lot better and I got a lot better. So I don't know if that was the idea of an interesting story, but that's the one I got. Let's see, how did game development go in general? It's very modern. Game development back in the day was different. Like today, come up with a 2 week. This is roughly what happens is come up with goals. Like a list, a checklist for the next 2 weeks, and Eric and the other engineers will work on the features. I will work on confirming that they're functional and in the game and fun and all that kind of stuff. And the artists work on the art, the level does, Dylan works on the levels, and it's neat. Like it's very dynamic. Like we can adjust. Like since we're not locked into like a month or 3 month plan, it's only about 2 weeks. Like we can always pivot and change direction and stuff, and that's very cool. That's something I really appreciate. If Clone Drone and the Hyperdome Dome, if Clone Drone and the Hyperdome had a trequel or a sequel that was also a sequel to a sequel, how would you make it? I have no idea. But well, part of me wants to say it wouldn't happen for a long time because it would actually be an AR. It would be an augmented reality. So like, because that's every time Eric's come up with a game, it's like it's a different thing. It's like completely like the voxel dismemberment in Clone Drone and the Danger Zone was so, in my mind, in my opinion, it was so revolutionary. You know, it was like it was more than a gimmick. It was just like it was really cool. And then to transition that into VR, like it would need to be the next paradigm of an experience, right? So it'd need to be like augmented reality, like come up with some sort of, I don't know if it would be Perlin noise or, you know, some mathematical equation. I have no idea. I'm not the one coming up with these things, but I think the only way a sequel to a sequel would happen is if we could even further, like, develop the platform it's on. So, like, this hardware in reality doesn't even exist yet. So, it might be a while. It might be as long between Clone Drone and the Danger Zone, Clone Drone and the Hyperdome, to Clone Drone and the Hyperdome and its sequel. That's what I'm thinking, but no official word, like, or unofficial word for that matter. Like, there has been zero discussion of, like, any sort of a sequel. Mostly just concentrating on what do we add to make a fun time. Like, what can we add to make it more fun for Clone Drone and the Hyperdome, kind of a thing. What changes would you like to make to existing games? Oh boy, that's a good question. I don't like microtransactions. I don't like paying for cosmetics. You know what I mean? Like, I know some people do, but I just, I don't know. Like, I was playing For Honor for a little bit and, like, fell into that trap of, like, oh, well, my friend has this armor set, and so I'll spend $60 to get the in game currency to, you know, because I don't want to play 2 weeks solid to get the armor kind of a thing. And it's like, that's bad enough, but like it's kind of predatory as well. Like you look at games like Balatro that have an 18 plus rating in Europe. You look at games like sports games with loot crates, which is, in my opinion, genuine gambling with 13 plus ratings. Like I would get rid of that stuff. Like I don't get, like, as soon as companies went public, like as far as being publicly traded, like it changed who they were beholden to. Before it was the players, and now it's people that own a lot of their stock. So I get that's how capitalism works. I don't think that's what makes good games. Like I think indie games are the good games today. And if a big game comes out that just happens to be good, like that's the exception instead of the rule, sadly. Like when I was growing up, AAA used to mean something. And now it means microtransactions. Like there's even games that are single player where you pay for like revives and stuff in a single player game. There's microtransactions there. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not fun. That's like my end all be all. It's not fun. Um, but like, I guess it makes some money, so it's probably not going away easily. Anyway, like, sorry if that was a bit political or whatever, but like, yeah, that's what I would change. I would get rid of microtransactions in like all games. They don't make sense to me. Are you planning to? Oh, so this was more of what do you want to do about the concurrent player count for Steam, or for I guess both platforms for Contra and Hyperdome. Are you planning to raise online and CDHD? If so, how? So with Clone Run and the Danger Zone, the reason I found out about Clone Run and the Danger Zone is because Eric released it on itch.io, and then Jacksepticeye played it. And then suddenly, like, everyone was talking, like, well, not everyone, but, like, a lot more people were talking about it, so I downloaded it and tried it out, and, like I mentioned, it crashed, and, you know, I, sent in a bug report, and Eric ended up hiring me. It was weird. It was cool, but, like, unexpected. So, like, I think we don't really have a different plan for, like, in a way, we're trying to strike, you know, catch lightning in a bottle twice kind of a thing. We've already had two major channels, or three major channels. One, not English. Um, cover the game, but just hoping to add more value, add more fun, add more playtime, and organically have more and more big YouTubers cover it. Seems to be the plan for now. Like, will it work? I have no idea, but I'm here for the long haul. Like, I'll gladly work on it another year. If that's how long it takes for, I don't know if Jacksepticeye does VR, but like the VR equivalent of Jacksepticeye to play it, if that happens in a year, like I'll be here for it. Like I'll keep working on it. Hopefully it happens sooner though. And the final question is, how are you? As I kind of got into in one of these questions, like I am probably doing the best I have in 8 years. You know what I mean? Like 2022 was a low for me overall, very much so, and people could tell. People could definitely tell, and I could tell, and I was tired of it. So I asked for help. Like I reached out. I have a therapist, I have a psychiatrist, I have support, I have friends who support me. Many friends, like many, many people in my phone I can call day or night, kind of a thing. So, like, I think to expound on that, like, if you're sitting there or if you're watching this or whatever, like, if you're going through depression or moods that you don't have an explanation to, like, don't feel afraid. Like, there is help out there, right? Like, no matter where you are in the world, there are people that can help. Not everyone needs medication, but some people do. And, like, talk to a clinical psychologist and maybe get a recommendation, a referral to a psychiatrist. And, like, for me, I'm only speaking from my personal experience. Like, it makes the difference. Like, it allows me, like, my medication allows me to function on a day-to-day basis where if I didn't take it, I would not be functioning. I would not be working for doborog. I might not be alive, kind of a thing. So there is help out there. There is hope. It just takes making that decision that you don't want to live in the condition you're living in anymore. And to have that willpower, that willingness to, you know, ask for help. It's hard. I know. Like, what? You're telling me I can't do this on my own? It's like, not always. Like, a lot of times you can, but like sometimes you can't, and that's okay. Like, the goal is to get better, right? Like, the goal is to get to a point where, maybe you can help someone else, kind of a thing. Because, like, it's a team effort. Mental illness, stuff like that is a team effort. It takes a village. So, yeah, I'm doing a lot better. Probably the best I have ever since working for Doborog, which, yeah, 8 years. That's a long time. Um, but I think that's all the questions. So I'm going to make these smaller because these files are huge, and then send them on to V22. Thank you so much.
So, the interview turned out great, and I hope there will be more such interviews in the future. Bye.